Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We'll be learning today Mirz Hashem Daf Lamed Daled Amid Beis. We pick up today on the bottom line of Lamed Daled Amid Aleph. We are continuing to learn Hilchas Tisha B'Av, and we are holding in Siman Taf Kuf Nun Ches in the words of the Ramah in Sif Aleph. Bottom line Lamed Daled Amid Aleph. So I'm just going to read from the beginning of Sif Aleph in the Mechaber, just for continuity's sake. We're not going to do the Mishnah Berurah that we did yesterday, but just read from the beginning. So the Mechaber said, Tisha B'Av leis erev yitzisu eish b'heichal, like we have mentioned already several times, the actual burning of the Beis HaMikdash began in the afternoon of Tisha B'Av, near the evening. That's when they actually lit the flames in the Beis HaMikdash. V'nisraf ad shkias hachama b'yom asiri, and the Beis HaMikdash continued to burn until nightfall, until sundown on the 10th day of Av. And because of this, because the Beis HaMikdash was actually burning for the vast majority of the 10th day of Av, minig kosher, it is a kosher minig, a proper minig, shaloi lechel basar, that one should not eat meat, v'shaloi lishtois yayin, one should not drink wine, Baleil Asiri, on the night going into the 10th day of Av, so that's on motzoei Tisha B'Av. You might think that the tinus is over. Now all the restrictions of the 9 days, Tisha B'Av, the 3 weeks, everything falls off. Says the Mechaber, no. Motzoei Tisha B'Av, it is proper not to eat meat, not to drink wine, not only on motzoei Tisha B'Av, but according to the Mechaber, v'yom asiri, and on the 10th day of Av as well, says the Mechaber, these restrictions should remain in place. Then the Ramah said, Haga, v'yesh machmirin ad chatzois hayom v'lo yoser. There are those that have this minig to be machmir, not for the entire 10th day of Av, but only until chatzois, only until midday on the 10th day of Av. And it seems that that's the way we are noig. And in learning the Mishnah Berurah, it came out that this chumrah of keeping some of the restrictions on motzoei Tisha B'Av, as well as through chatzois on the next day, it does not only pertain to the eating of meat and the drinking of wine, but also tashmish hamita, marital relations. The Mishnah Berurah said one should refrain. He brought this down from the Knesset Hagdolah. One should refrain from marital relations on the night of motzoei Tisha B'Av, unless it's the Leil Tefillah, or he's going out traveling, or he just came back from traveling. And also in Mishnah Berurah's Cut and Gimel, the Mishnah Berurah also said taking a shower, taking a haircut, doing laundry, all of these things, the Mishnah Berurah said one should refrain from doing them until Chatzos on the 10th day of Av, unless Tisha B'Av falls out on Thursday, in which case the 10th day of Av is Friday, and you need to do these things in preparation for Shabbos. Then these things are mutter if you're doing them l'kavod Shabbos. So if you would have to do laundry, l'kavod Shabbos. If you have to take a haircut, l'kavod Shabbos. Take a shower, l'kavod Shabbos. All of those things would be mutter. And the implication from the Paiskim is that listening to music as well would be forbidden until Chatzos on the 10th day of Av. Now let's continue the Ramah on the bottom line here, in the middle of the line. Says the Ramah, Imchal Tisha B'Av b'Shabbos. Let's say Tisha B'Av fell out on Shabbos. So now the tzayim, the fast, is a nidcha. You're not going to fast on Shabbos, you're going to fast on Sunday. But Sunday is really the 10th day of Av, and then Monday, the day after the tinus, is the 11th day of Av, not the 10th day of Av. So what happens to these continuing restrictions that on a normal year we would keep on the 10th day of Av? Says the Ramah, Imchal Tisha B'Av b'Shabbos, if Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, v'nidchel yom rishon, so that the fast was postponed until Sunday, mutter lechal basar v'yayin yom sheni, then it is permissible to eat meat and to drink wine on Monday, because Monday is not the 10th day of Av. Monday is the 11th day of Av. So there's no reason to keep these minhagim of mourning, these mourning customs on the 11th day of Av. There's no mourning on the 11th day of Av. Aval balayla, but on motzoei Tisha B'Av, meaning Sunday night, so really it's motzoei the 10th day of Av, but it's motzoei the tinus, aval balayla, but at night, aser. At night, eating meat, drinking wine is forbidden, even though it's already after the 10th day of Av. And the Ramah says the reason for that is b'pnei avelus shel yom. Since you are being noeg avelus for the entire day of Sunday, because that's when the fast was. The fast was a nidche to Sunday. It's since you were being noyeg avelus, the avelus does not go off at the end of the day. You have to keep the avelus motzoei the tainus as well. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah on Lamed number days. Mishnah Berurah is cut in Daled. Ava balayla aser hainu rak ba'achilas basar shtiyas yayin. However, says the Chavetz Chaim, the only minhage avelus that continue after the fast, if it's a nidcha on Sunday, is that you cannot eat meat and you cannot drink wine. Ava b'tispeiris mutar l'kol yalma, but haircuts would be mutar right away, motzoei the tainus. And the Ramah said the reason that we have to keep the minhagim not to eat meat, not to drink wine on motzoei tainus, even though it's already after the 10th day of Av, the Ramah said avelus shel yom, because of the avelus that you kept during the day. Says the Chavetz Chaim here in his cut in hay. Mashma, the implication is the rak bazeh. It's only here on Tisha B'Av that was a nidche to Sunday. Mipnei avelusai shel Tisha B'Av, because of the extreme avelus, the extreme mourning that we're in on Tisha B'Av, where we're mourning over the loss of the Beis Hamikdash in Yerushalayim. Machmerinan gam balaylo she'achrav. That's when we have this concept that we have to continue the mourning, even motzoei tainus. Tehu k'may bein hamitzarim, because we're going to consider motzoei tainus, the night after the tainus, Sunday night. We're going to consider that to be at least similar to the beginning of the 3 weeks between Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and Rosh Chodesh Av, or really between during the 9 days. The Ben Hamitzarim, we're going to consider it to be akin to the 9 days. The Yesh Anoshim Shemach Marinan. No, I'm sorry, I go back again. The Chavetz Chaim is saying that the motzoei tainus, we're going to give it at least the severity of the 3 weeks, the time between Shiva Asar and Rosh Chodesh. We had learned earlier that there are those individuals that are machmir all the way from Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. They already stop eating meat and drinking wine. So the motzoei tainus, at the end of the day of the avelus of Tisha B'Av, it's appropriate to have at least that level of chumrah that eating meat and drinking wine you shouldn't do. But there is no room for this chumrah by any other of the Tanesim. We're not going to say that motzoei asar b'tevis, there's something wrong with breaking your fast on meat or drinking wine. It's true that it's a fast of avelus, but we don't find such a concept. I think what the Chavetz Chaim is saying is that you're going to ask me, why should there be an isser of eating meat and drinking wine, motzoei tainus? Especially when the motzoei tainus, when the tainus was a nidche, so the tainus was on the 10th day of Av, not on the 9th, and now motzoei tainus is already the 11th day of Av. Where do we get the concept that we should have an isser of eating meat and drinking wine? So the Chavetz Chaim is explaining where it comes from, and he brings this down from the Eliyah Rabbah. He says he brings it down from the Beis Yosef. Yeah, he's bringing it down from the Beis Yosef. He says that the concept comes because we do have the concept of being machmir, not to eat meat and not to drink wine because of avelus. Some people keep that already beginning with Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. So if some people keep it already beginning Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, it's appropriate to extend it to motzoei tainus. That's why we have such a concept here. Okay, now we go to Siman Tov Nun Tes. Minhagei Tisha B'Av, customs that we keep on Tisha B'Av, V'din Mila b'Tisha B'Av, and the halachas that pertain to a bris Mila that would be held on Tisha B'Av, Uba Yud Seifim, and here in this Siman we have 10 Seifim. Says the Mechaber in Sif Aleph, Imchal Tisha B'Av b'motzoei Shabbos. If the tainus falls out on motzoei Shabbos, so that would be both if the 9th day of Av is actually Sunday, so it's not a nidche. The 9th day of Av, Tisha B'Av, is Sunday. So when does the tainus begin? The tainus begins motzoei Shabbos. Or if Shabbos itself was Tisha B'Av, and now the fast is a nidche, it's postponed to Sunday, again the tainus begins motzoei Shabbos. So in either case, Imchal Tisha B'Av b'motzoei Shabbos, Ein oimrim tzidkascha b'mincha b'Shabbos. We do not recite the psukim of tzidkascha, By Mincha, usually by Mincha on Shabbos afternoon, we say 3 psukim. Tzidkascha tzedek li'olam, your righteousness is an everlasting righteousness. V'tzidkascha likim, and your righteousness, Hashem, v'tzidkascha likim, tzidkascha tzedek li'olam, tzedek chemes, tzidkascha tzedek likim admarim, asher asisa gedolah ismicha meicha. Again, we extol the tzedek, the righteousness of the Rebbeinu Shalom. Tzidkascha kaharei kel mishpatecha toim rabba adam uvehema toishia Hashem. Sorry, my memory failed me for a second there to get the 3 psukim. So these are the 3 psukim of tziduk hadin, of justifying the mishpat, the din of the Rebbeinu Shalom, that we typically recite after Mincha on Shabbos afternoon. Now, why do we recite tziduk hadin? Why do we justify the Rebbeinu Shalom's mishpat on Shabbos afternoon? So there are various reasons that are brought down. One is that we know that Shabbos is a great time of rejoicing. What I usually like to say is that Shabbos is the one day a week that we live reality. The rest of the week is pretend. What do I mean? The rest of the week, we go out and we work, and we have a job, and we work for our parnasa, and we're busy with inyane olam hazeh. That's all a fraud. That's all living a life of pretend, because we know that it's not kaichi v'aitzim yadi. It's not the work of my hands is not what brings me my parnasa. My parnasa comes from Barei Olam. And like I keep on saying, and it's not the COVID vaccine that protects you from infection. It's the Rebbeinu Shalom that protects you from infection. I'm always careful to say, don't say that Rabbi Weiss said you shouldn't get the vaccine. 100% get the vaccine. That's normal hishtadlus. That's a called for hishtadlus. But don't have betachin in the vaccine. Have betachin in the Rebbeinu Shalom. So all week long, we live a fraud. On Shabbos, we live reality. On Shabbos, we're not allowed to do malacha. On Shabbos, we're not allowed to go to work. On Shabbos, we celebrate that everything comes from Barei Olam. So on Shabbos, we could live a life of reality, and we could dedicate ourselves to Avodas Hashem. We could spend more time in the Beis HaKnesses and in the Beis HaMedrash. We could spend more time on Avodas Hashem and not worry about the Havlei Olam Hazeh. Shabbos afternoon, our neshama starts to sense that the Shabbos is drawing to a close, and we're about to go back to the Havlei Olam Hazeh. That's hard on our neshama. And if we elevate ourselves to a high enough degree, it's hard on us. We realize Shabbos is drawing to an end. What's going to be? We have to go back to the drudgery of the week. So therefore we say, Tzidkascha tzedek li'olam. We're matzdik the din. We're matzdik the Rebbeinu Shalom, that this is the life that the Rebbeinu Shalom makes us lead. That's one reason that's brought down. Another reason that's brought down is it's brought down that Moshe Rabbeinu, Yosef HaTzadik, and David HaMelech all were nifter on Shabbos afternoon. So we're matzdik the din of the Rebbeinu Shalom that we lost these great luminaries of our history. We lost them all on Shabbos afternoon. So Shabbos afternoon, we're matzdik es hadin. Now, over here it says the Mechaber, Imchal Tisha B'Av b'motzoei Shabbos, if Tisha B'Av is going to be motzoei Shabbos, ein oimrim tzidkascha b'mincha b'Shabbos. Then on Shabbos afternoon after mincha, we do not recite tzidkascha. Why not? Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut in Aleph. Ein oimrim, we don't recite tzidkascha. Midi dahavi arosh chodesh shechal lihiyos be'echad b'Shabbos. Because this is similar to the halacha that we have of when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Sunday. We know that when Rosh Chodesh is Sunday, Shabbos afternoon, we don't say tziduk hadin. She'ein oimrim tzidkascha v'tzidkascha tzidkascha. Those are the words that begin each one of the 3 psukim. B'Shabbos. We don't say tzidkascha on Shabbos when Rosh Chodesh is on Sunday. And the Tisha B'Av, nami ikri moyed. The reason we don't do it is because Rosh Chodesh is a moyed. Rosh Chodesh is ashtikal Yom Tov. And even though it's Shabbos afternoon and we want to say tziduk hadin, we don't need to say tziduk hadin because we're not leaving Shabbos. We're going from Shabbos right away into a moyed. And we know that Tisha B'Av is also called a moyed. Kara alai moyed. It's called a moyed. And halavai, one day it'll be nepach l'sasai nu l'simcha. So it's a moyed, and therefore on Shabbos afternoon we do not say tzidkascha. Now we go to the Ramah, the first line of Siman Tov Nun Tes. Hagah, says the Ramah, Umavdilin balayla betfila. We say Havdalah in our Shmona Esrei on motzoei Shabbos when it's Tisha B'Av. So we say Atachanantanu Kishar motzoei Shabbos, just like we do on any other motzoei Shabbos. Now the Berurah says that there doesn't seem to be any chiddush in the words of the Ramah here. There doesn't seem to be any reason why we wouldn't say Atachanantanu on motzoei Shabbos, even though it's Tisha B'Av. What does one have to do with the other? So the Berurah says that in this phrase we really don't have a chiddush. The chiddush comes in the next halacha. So the Ramah says, "Umavdilan balayla betfila kishar motzoei Shabbos." We say Atachanantanu on motzoei Shabbos when it's Tisha B'Av, just like any other motzoei Shabbos. Ve'im shachach milahavdil. But if you forgot Atachanantanu, what's the halacha if you forgot Atachanantanu? Says the Ramah, Ayin le'el simin reish tzadik dalet siv gimel. He says you should go back to reish tzadik dalet Hilchos Shabbos in siv gimel, and you should see over there. Now over there's an interesting halacha. What's the halacha all year round if you forgot Atachanantanu? So I think everybody's reaction immediately is, oh, you don't repeat Shemona Esrei for Atachanantanu. And 9 times out of 10, you're right. You don't repeat Shemona Esrei for Atachanantanu. However, there is an exception. The exception is if you didn't say Atachanantanu and you happen to know, or you're at least reasonably certain, that tonight you are not going to have the ability to be mavdal al hakois. Let's say you're traveling somewhere. I don't know where you are, whatever it is. You're stuck in the middle of who knows where. And you don't have a kais. You don't have yayin. You have no possibility of getting wine. So you're not going to make Havdalah al HaKais tonight. If you know you're not going to make Havdalah al HaKais on motzoei Shabbos, and you forgot to say Atachanantanu, then you do repeat Shemona Esrei to say Atachanantanu in your tefillah. That's the halacha over there. Now, over here in Tisha B'Av, you have a very interesting scenario. You forgot to say Atachanantanu, and you know you're not going to make Havdalah al HaKais, because you don't make Havdalah al HaKais motzoei Shabbos if it's Tisha B'Av. When do you make Havdalah? You make Havdalah Sunday night. So what's the halacha over here? Do we look at this and we say, this is a person who forgot Atachanantanu, and he knows he's not making Havdalah al HaKais tonight, and therefore he should repeat Shemona Esrei and say Atachanantanu? Or maybe no. Why? Because the normal person who knows that he's not going to make Havdalah al HaKais Sunday night, he's probably also not going to, motzoei Shabbos, he's probably also not going to make Havdalah al HaKais on Sunday night. Right now, he doesn't have the wherewithal to make Havdalah al HaKais. So he knows he's not making Havdalah al HaKais tonight, and he doesn't know if he's going to be able to make Havdalah al HaKais in the future either. So he has to repeat Shemona Esrei to say Atachanantanu. But Tisha B'Av, yes, it's true. You're not making Havdalah al HaKais tonight because it's a tainus. But you're fully planning to make Havdalah al HaKais tomorrow night. So since you know that you're going to make Havdalah al HaKais Sunday night, there's no reason for you to repeat Shemona Esrei to say Atachanantanu. Okay. Continues the Ramah. By me, it's the third line down in Siman Tov Nun Tes. Umispalalim benachas, says the Ramah, when you go into Tisha B'Av, Ma'ariv Tisha B'Av by night, you should daven slowly, v'derech bechi, and you should daven using crying. You should daven in a very somber tone, almost like a wailing, not using the regular nusach. You should use more a nusach of bechi, of crying. Kavelim, like mourners. V'chein oisem b'kriyas eicha. And so too should you do when you lane eicha. Eicha should be laned in a wailing, crying intonation, and it should be laned slowly. Let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah here, Ois Cotton Bays. Says the Mishnah Berurah, V'chein oisim, this is what we do when we lane eicha. We lane eicha derech bechi. We lane it with a mournful intonation, and we lane it slowly. Says the Chavetz Chaim, V'yafsik ben kol pasuk ma'at. You should give a slight pause between each pasuk. You shouldn't be running from one pasuk straight into the next. Finish a pasuk, give a slight pause, then go on to the next pasuk. Ubein kol eicha yoiser ma'at. And between each parak, you should have a little bit of a longer pause between each parak. Now it's interesting that the Chavetz Chaim says, Ubein kol eicha. He seems to refer to the individual prakim of eicha, each one being an eicha. Now the truth is that the first parak of eicha begins with the word eicha. The second parak begins with the word eicha. The third does not. The third starts ani hagever. And then the fourth starts with eicha again. And the fifth also does not start with eicha. It starts Zachar Hashem Mehel Yolanu. Now it's brought down that Yirmiyah Hanavi, who was the mechaber, the composer of eicha, he originally wrote Parak Aleph, Parak Beis, and Parak Dalet. So he wrote the three prakim that each started with eicha. Later, after the Churban, he added in the third parak, Ani HaGever, and he added in the fifth parak, Zachar Hashem Mehel Yolanu. So that's why those don't begin with eicha. But the Chavetz Chaim over here, I think when he says, Ubein kol eicha, yoser ma'at, you should pause a little bit longer between each eicha. I think he means between every parak. He should pause a little bit longer. Okay. Upasaka achrain shebachal eicha, and with the last pasuk of each parak, Omer b'kol ram, he should raise his voice at the end. Ule'inyan bracha lefaneha, and when it comes to the question of whether or not you should recite a bracha before the laning of eicha, says the Chavetz Chaim, Ein le'el b'siman taf tzadik, he sends us back to Siman Taf Tzadik, Seif Sif Tes, at the end of Sif Tes, Ba'agah, in the Ramah, uve Mishnah Berurah Sham, and in the Mishnah Berurah over there. Now over there, that's where the Mechaber discusses the minig to lane Shir Hashirim on Pesach, and Rus on Shavuos, and Kehelis on Sukkos. And over there, the Ramah says, and I'll read you the language of the Ramah, says, V'ha'am nahagu, we are noyig shaloi levarech aleihem, that we do not make a bracha al mikra megillah, we don't make the bracha of al mikra megillah on the laning of Shir Hashirim, Rus, and Keheles, v'loy al mikra ksuvim, nor do we recite a different bracha al mikra ksuvim. Adkan, that's what the Ramah says over there. Now, if you take a look in the Darkei Moshe, the Ramah on the Torah, back in Taf Tzadik, it's very clear that the Ramah seems to include eicha in this as well. That we don't make a bracha the same way we don't recite a bracha on Shir Hashirim, Rus, and Keheles. We also don't make a bracha on eicha, because the Darkei Moshe says over there that the only Megillah we make a bracha on is Megillas Esther. Now, why is it that we don't make a bracha on the laning of the other Megillas? So I know that there's a Mordechai that brings down the reason we don't make a bracha on the other Megillas is because they're not brought down in Shas. In Shas, we don't have a source, Medina de Talmuda, from the halacha that we have brought down in Shas Bavli, we don't have a source to lane Shir Hashirim, Keheles, and Rus. We only have a source to lane Esther. Therefore, Esther, we say a bracha. We say Asher Kedishanu b'mitzvaysa v'tzivanu, because we know that we have a din d'Rabbanan, we have a chiyuv d'Rabbanan to lane Megillas Esther. But Shir Hashirim, Keheles, and Rus, Medina de Shas, from Shas, we don't have a tzivui to lane them. So how could we say v'tzivanu? Now, what's interesting is eicha. What's the source for laning eicha? So the truth is, it could be that there is a source in Shas for laning eicha, in the Masechtas Ketanos that are printed in most Shasim after Masechtas Avodah Zarah, the end of Nezikin. In Masechtas Seifrim, it is brought down to lane Megillas Eicha on Tisha B'Av. It's also brought down in the Medrash, in Eicha Rabasi. It's brought down to lane Eicha on Tisha B'Av. So it could be that there is a source in Shas to lane Eicha, which would bring back the question, should we make a bracha on Eicha or not? The minig is not to. Now, another reason that's brought down not to make a bracha on the other Megillas other than Esther is that it's inappropriate to make a bracha on the laning of a Megillah unless it's a Megillah that's written on klaf the way we write a Sefer Torah. Most Kehillas don't have klaf for HaTorah, and they don't have klaf for Shir Hashirim, for Keheles, and for Rus, and therefore we wouldn't make a bracha. Now you'll ask me, well, okay, but how about if you do have a klaf? For instance, in Yeshiva Staten Island, they lane the HaTorah every Shabbos from a klaf. They lane Shir Hashirim, Keheles, and Rus from a klaf. They lane Eicha from a klaf. So maybe you should make a bracha. So one of the things that the Achronim bring down is that, wait a second, why do you think most kehillas don't have a klaf? If the halacha would be that if you have a klaf, you would make a bracha, then Klal Yisrael would certainly be mahader to have a klaf. So from the fact that the minig is not to have a klaf, that shows you that you don't make a bracha on them. Also by Eicha, specifically, it's brought down that maybe one of the reasons we don't make a bracha is because there's a reason why nobody had a klaf for Eicha. The reason nobody had a klaf for Eicha was because a sefer wasn't willing to put in the time to write Eicha on a klaf. Why am I going to write Eicha on a klaf? This coming year there won't be a Tisha B'Av. Mashiach is going to come and nobody's going to use the Eicha. So I'm going to put time into writing Eicha on a klaf, then Mashiach is going to come and all my work was for nothing. So the Seifrim didn't want to write Eicha on a klaf. And therefore it's also inappropriate to make a bracha because nobody has a klaf come out. Okay. Continues the Mishnah Berurah here in Ice Cotton Bays. V'toiv sheyachid yikra Eicha gam b'yoyim. The Chavetz Chaim tells us that it is a good minig, the chiyuv, if you will, the minig to lay in Eicha is really by Ma'ariv, at night, not so much by day. But he says, v'toiv, it would be proper, sheyachid yikra Eicha gam b'yoyim, that a yachid at least should read Eicha by day as well. Okay, now let's go back to the words of the Ramah. So the Ramah said, continues the Ramah, Ubechol Eicha, when we begin each parak of Eicha, Magbia Koiloi Yoiser. When you first start laning Eicha at the beginning, Eicha Yashva, you lane very low, very quietly. But then with the beginning of each parak, you get a little bit louder. When the Balkari reaches at the end, not the last pasuk, but I think the second to last pasuk of Eicha, when he reaches the pasuk of Hashivenu Hashem Elecha v'Noshuva Chadish Yemenu Kikedem, when the Balkari reaches that pasuk, Oimrim Oisai HaKahal B'Kol Ram. Before the Balkari reads the pasuk of Hashivenu, the Tzibur says the pasuk of Hashivenu out loud. Then the Balkara reads Hashivenu through to the end of Eicha. The last pasuk gives Kiyim Ma'is Ma'astanu Katzaf Aleinu Ad Ma'id. V'chayzer Akal V'Oimrim Hashivenu B'Kol Ram. Then the Tzibur says the pasuk of Hashivenu out loud over again. V'chein HaChazan, and the Chazan also lanes the pasuk of Hashivenu over again. So that the last thing that's heard is a pasuk of Nechama, is a pasuk where we're asking the Rabbeinu Shalom, Hashivenu Hashem Elecha v'Noshuva, bring us back to you, return us to you. We don't want to end off with the pasuk Kiyim Ma'is Ma'astanu. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah, Ice Cotton Gimel. V'chein HaChazan. V'chein HaChazan. That's the Balkare ends off his kriya with the pasuk of Hashivenu. So now the words v'chein HaChazan were by, we said that when the Balkare gets up to Hashivenu, then the Tzibur says Hashivenu out loud. Right? Then the Chazan finishes, then the Tzibur says Hashivenu again, and then the Chazan says Hashivenu again. After the reading of Eicha is completed, then the Shliach Tzibur starts with the kinus. The first kinna is Zechar Hashem mehayolanu oi, habita ureis cherpaseinu oi mehayolanu. Now, if you take a good look at that kinna, you'll realize that that kinna is composed of all of the psukim of the last parak of Eicha. So you start off Zechar Hashem mehayolanu. That's the first phrase of the first pasuk of the fifth parak of Eicha. So you say Zechar Hashem mehayolanu oi. Then you say Habita ureis cherpaseinu. That's the end of the first pasuk, and then you say Oy mehayolanu. V'chein cholu kol psukim, and in this way you divide all of the psukim of the last parak of Eicha. That's how this kinna was composed. You split it up with the word Oy, v'soifan ba'oy mehayolanu, and then you read the rest of the pasuk and you say Oy mehayolanu. Okay, now we go to Sif Beis. He says the Mechaber. Balel Tisha B'Av at night. Mispalalim Arvis, the Ramah says we daven Ma'ariv. Va'imrim Echa, and then we read Echa, we learn Echa. The Kinois, and then we recite Kinois. Va'imrim Acha Kinois, the Echa, after we finish learning Echa and saying Kinos, we say Seder Kedusha. We say Uval Tzion, but we don't start from the beginning of Uval Tzion. We only begin from the Kedusha section. We start with the Vata Kadosh Yeshev Tilos Yisrael, the Korazal Zevi Amar, Umaschel Mevata Kadosh. You know what? Let's stop over there for a second. Let's see, the Mishnah Berurah is cutting Dalet. Mispalalim Arvis. So it's now Tisha B'Av. We daven Ma'ariv, Batchila. First we daven Ma'ariv. Va'omer Kadosh Shalem. After Ma'ariv, after we recite the Shtil Shmona Esrei, after Ma'ariv, the Shlich Tzibur, the Chazan, says Kadosh Shalem. He says the complete Kadesh. Tahainu im tiskabel achat tfilos arvis. He'll say Kadosh Shalem after the Shmona Esrei of Ma'ariv, complete with tiskabel Slaisai Vusain the Chol Beis Yisrael. V'emchal b'motzoei Shabbos. If we're talking about Tisha B'Av that's on motzoei Shabbos, ein mevarchen habanim. Some people have the minig to give a bracha to the children on motzoei Shabbos. We don't do that on Tisha B'Av. B'makom shenoigin bazeh. That's brought down from the Maharil. Ois katan hey v'oimrim echa v'kinois. After we daven Ma'ariv, we lay in echa and we say kinois. V'afilu kishuhu b'yachid. This is true even if somebody does not have access to a minyan. Even if somebody can't daven with a minyan, he still should lay in echa and he still should recite kinnis. Ois katan vav miva'ata kadosh. We say Uval Tzion, but we don't start from the beginning. We only start from Va'ata Kadosh. Says the Chavetz Chaim, V'lo Yomar Uval Tzion Goyel. We can't start from the beginning of Uval Tzion and say Uval Tzion Goyel, that the Redeemer, Mashiach, should come to redeem Klal Yisrael. She'en Geula Balayla, because the Goyel, the Mashiach, does not come at night. Why doesn't Mashiach come at night? The reason Mashiach doesn't come at night is because the Geula Shlema will be similar to Geulas Mitzrayim. We know by Geulas Mitzrayim, the pasuk says, "Va'aya be'etzem va'yi be'etzem hayom hazeh." The Klal Yisrael, Makas B'chayros, happened at midnight. Paroi came screaming and yelling, "Get out, get out, get out!" Klal Yisrael didn't leave. Klal Yisrael had a tzivui from the Rebbeinu Shalom, ve'ish al yotzei mipesach beisai ad boker. Nobody's allowed to leave their houses until the morning. So Paro was screaming, "Go, go, 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 go!" But the Yidden sat pretty. They sat tight. They didn't leave until the morning. In the morning, Moshe Rabbeinu said, "Now it's time to go. Now it's time to go." Why? Because the Rebbeinu Shalom showed they're going to go out when I want to go them out. Want them to go out. They're not going out when you want them to go out. They're going out when I want them to go out. And I don't want them to go out in the middle of the night. In the middle of the night, they look like a bunch of SKPs. They look like they snuck out in the middle of the night. That's not what I want. I want them to go out, like the pasuk says, biyod rama. I want them to go out in public. Everybody should see that they're going out the way they want to go out. I don't want them sneaking out in the middle of the night. The same thing by the Geula Shlema. By the Geula Shlema, it should come quickly. The Rebbeinu Shalom wants that we should go out biyod rama, be'etzem hayom, in the middle of the day. We're not going to go sneak out. So therefore the Goyel doesn't come at night, and since the Goyel doesn't come at night, it's inappropriate to say Uval Tzion Goyel at night. So that's why we don't say Uval Tzion Goyel. V'loi v'anizois brisi. We also can't start from the verse of v'anizois brisi Amar Hashem. We can't start from there either, because shenirek kebekayim bris alakinois. Because when we say v'anizois brisi, we're talking about a bris, a covenant that we have with the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's the bris that we made with the Rebbeinu Shalom over the Torah Kedosha. We don't want to be saying Tisha B'Av by night, V'ani zois brisi. It sounds like we're making a bris over Tisha B'Av. We want to have a covenant of mourning. No, we don't want that. So we don't say V'ani zois brisi on Tisha B'Av. And furthermore, there's another reason why it's inappropriate to say V'ani zois brisi now. The Asar b'divrei Torah. Because On Tisha B'Av, we're not allowed to learn Torah. So we can't speak about the bris that we have with the Rabbeinu Shalom on the Torah HaKdosha, where one of the things we say is that the Torah HaKdosha will never leave us. On Tisha B'Av, the Torah HaKdosha does leave us. We're not allowed to learn Torah on Tisha B'Av. So this is why we start from Va'at HaKadosh. Continues the Mechaber. So again, I'm just going to read from the beginning of Sif Beis. Belel Tisha B'Av Mispalam Arvis Vaymer Mecha V'Kinais Vaymer Achakinais V'Echa Sed Kedusha Maskal Mivat HaKadosh. Continues the Mechaber. V'Mechal B'Motzoei Shabbos. If Tisha B'Av begins on Motzoei Shabbos, Ein Oimrim V'Hinayam. We don't say V'Hinayam. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Zayin. Ein Oimrim V'Hinayam. We don't say the capital Tehillim of V'Hinayam that we usually say by Ma'ariv on Motzoei Shabbos. Because if you read V'Hinayam Hashem Elokeinu Aleinu Masi Yadeinu Kainaneu, we praise the Rabbeinu Shalom that Masa Yadeinu, our handiwork, the building of the Mishkan, Kainaneu, the Rabbeinu Shalom established it, and the Rabbeinu Shalom was Mashresh Chinasai. He brought his Shechina, he brought the divine presence into the Mishkan and into the Beis Hamikdash. That's inappropriate to say on Tisha B'Av. V'atam nechrav. We're commemorating the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. So it's not appropriate to say the capital of V'Hinayam. Continues the Mechaber, actually the Ramah. Hagah. We also don't say on Motzoei Shabbos the capital Tillim of Lamanatzeach B'Neginois. If you look earlier in Siman Reish Tzadik Gimel in Mishnah Berurah is Katan Aleph, the Mishnah Berurah says that there was a minig before Ma'ariv on Motzoei Shabbos to recite the capital Tillim Lamanatzeach B'Neginois Mizmar Shir Elokim Yechanenu V'Varachenu. There was a minig to say that capital before Ma'ariv on Motzoei Shabbos. We don't say it when it is Tisha B'Av. Says the Mishnah Berurah is Katan Ches V'Lo Lamanatzeach. Why? It's not really a part of Ma'ariv. If it was a part of the Sidrei HaTfilah, so then we would be allowed to say it even on Tisha B'Av. But it's not. Not everybody says it. It's a nice minig. Not everybody says it, but it doesn't rise to the level of the Seder HaTfilah, and therefore it's inappropriate to say it on Tisha B'Av. Continues the Ramah, right by the Ois Katan Tes for the Mishnah Berurah, 3 lines up from the bottom. V'loi v'yiten lecha. We also don't say v'yiten lecha likim mitala shamayim v'mishpani haaretz. Those psukim that there's a minig to say on Motzoei Shabbos, we don't say them on Tisha B'Av. Says the Mishnah Berurah's Katan Tes, v'loi v'yiten lecha she'enoi zmanoi b'Tisha B'Av. It's not an appropriate time to say v'yiten lecha on Tisha B'Av. V'yiten lecha talks about, that's the parsha of the brachas the Yaakov Avinu, the Yitzchak Avinu gave to Yaakov Avinu. That's brachas, blessings. On Tisha B'Av, it's not a time to recite brachas. We're not receiving brachas on Tisha B'Av. Finally, says the Ramah, u'mesirin ha'paroiches milifnei ha'arayin. We remove the pareiches. We take the pareiches down in the shul from off of the Aron HaKodesh. Al Shem Bitza Emrasai, because of the pasuk in Eicha that says Bitza Emrasai, that the Rabbeinu Shalom fulfilled what he said. He spoke that he was going to destroy the Beis Hamikdash, and indeed he did. The Beis Hamikdash is destroyed, and therefore to commemorate that destruction, we remove the pareiches from the Aron Kodesh. Okay, what time is it? It's already 38 minutes. All right, you know what? Let's go a little bit weiter. Siv Gimel. Leil Tisha B'Av v'Yomi. Tisha B'Av at night and the day of Tisha B'Av. Yoshvim b'veis hakneses la'aretz. We sit in shul on the ground, on the floor. Ad tfilas mincha, until the zman of mincha. Now the zman of mincha, you could first daven mincha at mincha gedola. Mincha Gedola is a half hour after Chatzos. So when the Mechaber says over here that you sit on the ground until Mincha, his kavana is, I don't think he means that it has to be until Mincha Gedola. You're allowed to sit on a chair already after Chatzos, but you don't have a Mincha until after Chatzos, because you don't have a Mincha until after Mincha Gedola. And also we're going to see that you're not really going to sit on a chair immediately after Chatzos, because the Mechaber is going to tell us that you go to the Beis HaMikdash, that you're supposed to say Kinnis all the way until shortly before Chatzos. Then you're supposed to go to the Beis Olam, to the Beis HaKvaros, and until you come back, already now you're going to daven Mincha. So that's already Mincha Gedola. So I think that's all he means when he says Atfilas HaMincha. Me'ikar Adin, it's after Chatzos. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah and Ois Katan Yud. Yoshvim, we sit on the ground. Why? Dumya the Avel, makes us similar to a mourner. Sheyoshav al gabe karka kol shiva, who sits on the ground or on a very low chair for the entire period of the shiva. However, this is not stringent to the level of the chamisha inuyim of fasting and anointing and marital relations and wearing shoes on Tisha B'Av. And since the minig of sitting on the floor is only a minig, it's not me'ikar dina deshas, so therefore it doesn't rise to the same level as chumrah, and you don't have to keep that halacha the entire day. You could sit already on a chair after chatzos. Ois Katan Yud Aleph la'aretz, you sit on the ground. Points out the Chavetz Chaim from a simple reading of the Mechaber. The Mechaber says the night of Tisha B'Av and by day you sit on the ground in the Beis HaKnesses. That sounds like you come into shul to daven Mariv and you sit on the ground. Points out the Chavetz Chaim, not so fast. Ois Katan Yud Aleph la'aretz hainu achar sha'anu baruch Hashem ha'mavorach. You can't sit on the ground until after you respond to Baruch Hu, because by Baruch Hu you have to stand. Your response to Baruch Hu, Baruch Hashem HaMavarach Le'olam Vayed, that has to be done by Amida. That has to be done when you're standing. So don't think that you're just going to walk into Shul for Marav and right away sit on the ground. You have to be standing for Baruch Hu. V'ayin b'achrayim, he says, take a look at the achrayim who say, the mutar l'niach tachto sak or karkatan. You're allowed to spread out a sack or a small cushion and sit on that. You don't have to sit directly on the ground. V'gam yuchal leishav al safsal namuch. You could also sit on a low chair. L'misha kasha lo leishav al haaretz. If it's difficult for you to sit directly on the ground, then you could sit on a low chair or on a pillow or on something. Okay, now what's interesting to me about this Mishnah Berurah is Katan Yud Aleph, is that the Chavetz Chaim is coming and he's saying, look at the Mechaber. The Mechaber said that you come into shul and you sit down on the ground. Says the Chavetz Chaim, realize you're not going to sit down on the ground the whole time because you have to stand up for Baruch Hu. But it sounds like the rest of the time he really wants you to be sitting on the ground. So the truth is, there are people who find it uncomfortable to sit on the ground, and therefore they spend a tremendous amount of the time of davening and of kiddush standing. And I'm not sure if that's really appropriate. It could be that the Chavetz Chaim is also showing me over here that yes, there are times during davening that you have to stand. You have to stand by Baruch Hu. But when you don't have to stand, the most appropriate thing would be to sit on the ground, because you're an oval. Standing doesn't show avelus. Sitting on the ground shows avelus. And we want you to be showing avelus. So the truth is, we probably should sit on the ground as much as we can. And you can't just sit on the ground for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. I also stand for a decent part. I stand for a while because I got to get up. My back is hurting. My legs are hurting. I got to get up. But as much as you can, I think he's showing us that really you should sit on the ground as much as possible to display avelus. Okay, that's where we're going to stop. So B'Yis Hashem, tomorrow we'll continue with the words of the Ramah and the bottom line here of Lamadal and Beis. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. The schus of limud HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshuas and Refuas and Parnasa to all those in need. And the Rebbeinu Shalom should finally bring the Bias Girl Tzedek B'Meher V'Yameinu. All of these halachas should no longer be Negeya. And Tisha B'Av should be Nepach, L'Sasayin, or L'Simcha. Be well.